Welcome to the special webinar, Ending Pandemics. Today's event features dignitaries, senior officials, a corporate champion, and conservation leaders in Thailand who are joining together to look at ways to prevent future pandemics. My name is Stephen Gelster. I'm the founder of Freeland and the co-chair of the End Pandemics Campaign Alliance. I'm also a member of the board of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, which is where I'm standing right now here in Bangkok. The world has understandably been very focused on the creation, the development, and rollout of vaccines. These vaccines are designed to protect us from the viral strain that we know of as COVID-19, which is still spreading around the world, respiking in some places, already sickening about 168 million people as of today, and already killing 3.5 million. But what about any new virus strains that could break out and result in yet another pandemic? Today's special webinar looks at the root causes of pandemics and what can be done through policy to help prevent new COVID-like outbreaks. There's been talk about the so-called One Health policy approach that is designed to mitigate zoonotic outbreaks by protecting the health of people, animals, and natural ecosystems at the same time, recognizing that they are interconnected. But what does it take to convert the talk about One Health into real action? We're extremely fortunate today to have with us His Excellency General Surayut Chalermphone, the President of the Privy Council of Thailand, who in a moment will open this event for us. This event was originally to happen in a hotel with a big crowd, but because of the respike of COVID, we've had to take extra precautionary measures. There's not too many press here today. We're socially distant and careful, and our speakers are coming into us virtually, and several will have pre-taped their messages because they have to attend a parliamentary session where COVID-19 will be discussed as well. But we're very lucky to have His Excellency Surayut with us. He will be followed by Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, who is also the Minister of Public Health, His Excellency Anutin Chanvirakul. Following Minister Anutin will be His Excellency Waravut Silpa Archa, Minister of Environment and Natural Resources. Following the Minister of Environment will be Dr. Harold Link, Chairman of B. Grimm Group, a multinational conglomerate based in Thailand that is also a partner and sponsor of the End Pandemics campaign. Finally, Ms. Pimpawadi Pahonyotin, CEO of WWF Thailand, will join me in facilitating a question and answer period. So anyone watching this virtually may submit questions and comments through the Facebook Live. We will see those. We will collate and answer as many of those that we can during the allotted time period. There's been quite strong interest in this event, so we're already thinking about doing a part 2, FYI. But before starting today, we'll now watch 2 minutes of End Pandemics campaign videos that speak to the very subject of today's webinar. These played over the last year and reached over 650 million people on CNN and CNBC.
We knew it was coming. The signs were all there. We knew we had to change, but we didn't. Destroying wild habitats, exploiting wildlife, turning a blind eye. Maybe it would go away. It didn't. It began to bite back. Primates had HIV, civets had SARS, bats and Ebola. COVID-19 is not the first pandemic, and it won't be the last, unless we deal with the root causes. It's time to stop the wildlife trade and to support compassionate, sustainable farming to protect our planet. Let's change our relationship with nature forever, for all life on Earth. The tiger rules the forest. and keeps nature in balance. All wild animals are precious and play vital roles on our planet. When we remove wild animals from their natural homes to trade them, we bring misery to them and tragedy upon ourselves. Their viruses mutated and gave us HIV, Ebola, SARS, bird flu, and COVID-19. We can all help prevent the next pandemic by ending the commercial trade in wild animals wherever it takes place. It's time to change our relationship with nature forever, for all lives on Earth. Join us.
It is now my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency General Surayut Chulanon, President of Thailand's Privy Council, to open this special webinar on ending pandemics. Your Excellency.
Good morning, distinguished guests and members of the media. I am very honored that Dr. Halal Ring of Big Rim Group, Thailand, asked me to give an opening remarks for this seminar on stopping pandemics, Thailand as a global leader. It is widely known that the COVID-19 catastrophe is a pandemic disease similar to SARS, HIV, Ebola, and bird flu, all of which are serious and potentially deadly to human lives. The awareness of how to prevent such emerging diseases is one of the world's most important topics as we look for ways to prevent such pandemics from happening again. Therefore, to foster the recovery from the COVID-19 in Thailand and to ensure that the future outbreaks will not happen again, all parties concerned, both public and private sectors, as well as experts, are cooperating to develop and share new approaches, focus on treatments from the root causes of the outbreaks. This seminar gives a perfect opportunity to discuss the said topic because Thailand has been recognized and admired by the World Health Organization and also by other countries around the world for our ability to manage the situation of the COVID-19 quite well in the early stages. This is a result from the country's strong public health infrastructure, the sacrifice of dedicated medical personnel, and the cooperation of all sectors in Thailand. In closing, I wish to you all a very successful seminar, one that will raise a common awareness over the dangers from viral diseases transmitted to humans. I am also hopeful to see a strong support from all sectors to help prevent the recurrence of the pandemic, not only in Thailand, but also anywhere in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I hereby open this seminar. Thank you.
ไม่ได้ยิน
And we also appreciate, as conservationists, we know about your history in nature conservation. He also plays, for those who don't know, the role of chairman of the Khao Yai Protection Foundation. So we know General Surayut from the past, and we really appreciate him joining our event today to open it up and speak to the significance of preventing pandemics, not only for Thailand, but for the rest of the world. I would now like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, also serving as the Minister of Public Health, Anutin Charnvirakul, who has taped a message for us because he has to join a special parliamentary session, but he has provided a pre-recorded message for him that we will listen to now.
His Excellency General Surayut Chulanon, the President of Privy Council, His Excellency Warawut Tilapa Acha, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources, Dr. Harold Link, the Chairman of BICRIM Group, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank BICRIM, the Worldwide Wildlife Fund Thailand, Freeland Foundation, and Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand for co-organizing this event. Today's event is a great opportunity for us to reflect on the current situation of COVID and highlight the importance of One Health approach in recognizing the interlinks and the need to work effectively across human, animal, and environment sectors to address emerging and re-emerging diseases. More than 2/3 of emerging infectious diseases have their origins in animals. All available evidence for COVID suggests that it has zoonotic source. The COVID pandemic is a good example to illustrate the importance of the One Health approach. As its impact is enormous, the pandemic does not only pose immediate challenges to human lives, but also creates unprecedented public health and economic consequences. The root causes include inadequate global health governance, as well as countries' capacities to promptly deal with the pandemic. We need global solidarity and stronger collaboration to address and mitigate its impacts. We all know that no one is safe until everyone is safe. Thailand has put our utmost efforts towards containing COVID. Public health measures are implemented in parallel with social measures such as advocating full face masks, physical distancing, and washing hands. Thailand also closely monitors variants. The government will start massive rollout of vaccines in June with an aim to vaccinate 100 million doses by the year end. This will cover 70% of people who live in Thailand. In the last few days, I addressed these experiences at the 74th session of the World Health Assembly. Thailand leads the world by example. We have acted fast since the day we identified the first COVID cases outside of China. We share genetic sequencing of the virus with the international community and World Health Organization since the outset. Extensive distribution of healthcare facilities and universal health coverage are two main factors for successful containment. Thailand ranks 4th in handling the pandemic. I must thank all frontline health workers and supporting staffs for their contribution to this success. Good cooperation by people is appreciated. 4 decades ago, Thailand initiated its field epidemiologist training program. This program and public health officers are the backbone of disease surveillance and response. I am chairing the National Steering Committee on antimicrobial resistance. Thailand applies the One Health approach to address with positive outcomes. Additionally, Thailand is the chair of the Global Health Security Agenda, which also adopted One Health measures to boost global health security. I'm very delighted to learn that Excellency Warawut Tilapa Acha, the Environment and Natural Resources Minister, also joins this webinar. His ministry is also responsible for monitoring infections in wildlife, such as bats and birds, that have the potential for transmission of viruses to humans. The Ministry of Public Health cannot work alone amidst the pandemic. We need one another to enhance our efforts in containing the virus and also in support of global health security. In answering the webinar's question on whether Thailand is able to lead a global effort to prevent future pandemics, with our experiences in previous outbreaks, I would say yes, and why not? But we need collective efforts to not let another pandemic happen again. I believe the other panelists would support these efforts too. Thailand stands ready to join hands with our partners to end the COVID and making it the last through One Health collaboration with all relevant partners for the benefit of our people, our nature, and our world. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, Anutin Charnvirakul. We heard from the Minister talking about the rollout of the vaccine in Thailand, but also about his recognition of the connection between zoonotic outbreaks and nature protection, wildlife. Also how Thailand looks to embrace the One Health policy approach. He also mentioned that no one is safe until we're all safe, and that he looks forward to working more across agency lines and with other sectors to implement One Health. And toward the end there, we also heard him say that Thailand is ready to play a global leadership role on preventing pandemics. We would now like to go to His Excellency Waravut Silpa Archa, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of Thailand.
Excellency General Surayut Julanon, President of the Privy Council, Excellency Mr. Anutin Charnvirakul, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Public Health, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Sawasdee krab. A very good morning to you all. And first of all, may I begin by warmly thanking the organizers, especially to Dr. Harold Link, Chairman of BGRIM, for inviting me to this timely and important high-level webinar in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis. During the last century, people have increasingly encroached upon the natural world, resulting in escalating levels of contact between humans and wildlife. Many people around the world rely on the wildlife for their livelihoods and to meet their basic needs. As a result, the frequency and number of new zoonotic diseases have risen drastically. Over 70% of the emerging infectious diseases, or EIDs, in humans have originated in animals. These EIDs pose a grave threat to human health, causing deadly pandemics including HIV, AIDS, SARS, H5N1, H1N1, and most recently, the COVID-19. It had been confirmed that on May 20th, 2021, more than 160 million people around the world are infected by the COVID-19 and more than 3 million people dead. The COVID-19 crisis exemplifies the devastating costs of global pandemics. Beyond these devastating costs, the same driving force is also exacerbating the current planetary emergency of nature loss and climate change, putting the health of current and future generations at risk. The COVID-19 crisis significantly proves that systemic changes is crucial. Meanwhile, it has demonstrated the power of global responses to drive forward the systemic changes with unprecedented shifts in people's daily routine, from wearing masks, regular hand wash, respecting social distancing. In certain countries, including Thailand, hundreds of thousands of people volunteering to support the crisis response. It is a remarkable opportunity to work together to address the unsustainable pressures that are being placed on the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, recognizing the effects of environmental factors on human health, the global community has adopted the One Health approach to collaborate among multiple disciplines, working locally, nationally, and globally to attain optimal health for people and animals, as well as a healthy environment. The approach illustrates that whether tackling environmental issues or health crisis, solutions must recognize the deep interrelation of different systems. It also reflects close collaboration among stakeholders in animal and human health sectors. Thailand has also adopted the One Health approach since we have been hit by H5N1 in 2004 and H1N1 in 2009. To date, attempts to ensure human and animal health security as well as the sustainability of the country's environment have made some progress. However, commitments from all stakeholders, trust and effective law enforcement at all levels are crucial, especially when coping with the COVID-19 outbreak. I sincerely believe that the root causes of the outbreaks, not only the COVID-19, but also other zoonotic diseases, need to be addressed. It is hypothesized that there is a linkage and relevance between wildlife and the EIDs, including COVID-19. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment has a strong determination to protect not only Thai people, but also our wildlife, natural ecosystems, as well as the environment. The ministry aims to make Thailand free of the illegal wildlife trade by collaborating with all stakeholders, including businesses and local community, to fight against illegal wildlife trade. Campaign on refraining from consuming meat from wild animals, particularly from illegal hunting and trading, have been undertaken through the motto "Stop Disease and Extinctions, Never Eat, Buy, Hunt or Sell Wildlife." We have been working with the Ministry of Public Health based on One Health approach by following up, monitoring and controlling diseases transmitted from animals to human, both EIDs and REIDs. The ministry is also well aware that wildlife trade laws are important as they can help prevent not only the illegal wildlife trade, but also the possible spread of the viruses. Therefore, the 2019 Wildlife Conservation and Protection Act has been formulated and entered into force in order to enhance protection levels of endangered species. The penalties, both in terms of fine and imprisonment, have dramatically increased. For example, the minimum fine of reserved species is over $9,000, while the imprisonment term is more than 10 years. I believed that the penalties for the illegal wildlife trafficking in Thailand now are amongst the strongest in the region, which hopefully can serve as effective deterrents for wildlife crimes. Nevertheless, law enforcement on illegal wildlife trafficking alone may not be sufficient to address the zoonotic diseases problem, as we realize that destruction of wild habitat forces wild animals into human territory, where zoonotic diseases can be transmitted from animal to people. We have introduced the approach on preservation of wildlife habitat in order to isolate the wild animals from humans by demarcating the area of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and wildlife non-hunting areas, which covers around 17% of the country. The enactment of the 2019 Community Forest Act is also a strong societal driving force that encourages people and local communities to conserve as well as to enlarge the forest areas based on their traditional knowledge and practices. Community forests also play a vital role as the buffer zone for separating wild animals from humans. Ladies and gentlemen, in this connection, I would like to emphasize that it is vital to tackle the sales and consumption of high-risk wildlife, as wildlife trade chain is the major source of the highest risk of zoonotic diseases. We need to stop the supply chain. Within the supply chain itself, the ASEAN region has been considered as either transit or destination countries. As such, we need to give priority to preventive measures to address the issues throughout the region. The best way to end illegal wildlife trade is to break its supply chain. Thailand, together with other ASEAN member states, have made our utmost efforts to tackle the problems through ASEAN Wildlife Enforcement Network, or known as the ASEAN WEN, initiated in 2005, and has been further developed as ASEAN Working Group on CITES and Wildlife Enforcement since 2016. It has been agreed to allocate necessary financial and human resources and to collaborate in cross-border cooperation and coordination to ensure the effective enforcement of the legislation governing sustainable management of wildlife and their habitat. Moreover, Thailand hosted the special ASEAN ministerial meeting on illegal wildlife trade in 2019 to jointly put forward a policy against illegal trade of wild animals at the regional and the global levels. Such policies have been translated into actions through the Plan of Action for ASEAN Cooperation on CITES and Wildlife Enforcement 2021 to 2025, which highlights law enforcement on the suppression of online illegal trade and the reduction of demand on wild animals. The plan also encompasses ASEAN member states to develop strategies for forestry and wildlife management that take into account the need to prevent the transmission of zoonotic diseases from wildlife to human. The ministers committed to further collaborate with each other to stop wildlife crimes, as well as to raise the people's awareness on dangers of wild animal consumption. As a matter of fact, no single country or region can fight this battle alone. Thailand has thus played an active role in global community, such as under CITES and the Convention on Biodiversity, in order to cooperate with other parties to respond to transnational wildlife crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, although we have put our utmost efforts to tackle the problems at all levels, as I mentioned, transboundary wildlife crime continues to be one of the most pressing challenges we are facing. This challenge has been made more difficult in the wake of the current pandemic. The COVID-19 crisis reconfirms how people and nature are interlinked, and how our negative impact on the natural world increases the risk of future pandemics. I wish that COVID-19 pandemic will be the catalyst for an increased awareness on the need for nature-based solutions. I believe that the best long-term solution to prevent the zoonotic disease is to protect nature. We have to put our nature on a path to recovery for the benefit of all the people and the planet. We have to stop illegal, unregulated, and high-risk wildlife trade and consumption. We need to build a new relationship between human and nature through a sustainable and just economic recovery. We must respect our Mother Nature. For mankind to survive into the next century, we must adapt to nature and not the other way around. This is a pivotal moment to build a safer future for people, our next generation, and our planet. I wish that the outcomes of this webinar will continue to sustainable recovery, which promote environmentally friendly and balanced growth while reducing a risk of emerging infectious diseases. Thank you for your attention. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Minister Warut Silpa Archa, Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of Thailand. Well, he spoke very strongly there about the link of the destruction of natural habitat and the threat of wildlife trafficking and its relationship to zoonotic outbreaks. The minister also spoke to the need for interagency, cross-border, and transcontinental cooperation to implement One Health approach. Also, that there's a need for stronger measures to address wildlife trafficking supply chains, not only in Thailand, but across borders in ASEAN and with the global community. He spoke about also a national campaign to get people to stop buying, selling, and consuming wildlife, stop extinction, stop pandemics, and generally spoke about the need for nature-based solutions, that we need to adapt to nature and not the other way around. We will now go to the virtual podium and invite Dr. Harold Link, the chairman of the B. Grimm Group, who speaks to us from his office here in Bangkok. Dr. Link is also one of the leading businessmen of Asia, but he is also a conservationist and has been helping out our organizations, WWF, Freeland, Sponsoring End Pandemics, and we welcome Dr. Harold Link now to speak. Dr. Link?
Thank you very much. I feel so honored that His Excellency, President of the Privy Council Generals, Thorayut Chalanon, and Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Public Health, Kun Anutin Chanvirakul, and the Minister of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Kun Varavut Chilapa Acha have spoken so clearly and excellently about protecting our nature and preventing the next zoonotic outbreak. So grateful that these three leaders for our country are so forceful and straightforward about what we have to do that we can achieve One Health. And one can see that actually it is all achievable. Now, what can a business do? What can we do to support or to be really a big part of preventing these diseases that come from wildlife? So I think the minister already said that what we should stop to do and what we shouldn't do. And there are a number of things that we can do to protect the natural habitats. So in case of Big Rim, we have been supporting the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment and the World Wildlife Fund for many years to protect the tiger and the national parks. Why would we want to protect the tiger? As we have seen in Europe and if we have seen in the Americas, if you take away the top of the food chain, then the total natural environment gets into disorder. On the other hand, when they reintroduce the top predators, then the natural environment improved vastly. So I think that's what we can all do. And there's always, of course, a need of funds. And businesses, of course, have funds. So we can support these foundations and governments and social units to protect wildlife. I'm so grateful and appreciative for Stephen Galster and his organization Freeland, which was founded in Thailand, Free standing for Thai, I presume, to initiate all this event and to initiate so many activities in so many years. And we work together very closely. Why did we, as Big Rim, sponsor the CNN clips you have seen in the beginning? Because we also believe in One Health. So this pandemic didn't start in Thailand. It started somewhere else. And so many others started in other places. So if the whole world understands possible outbreaks coming from wildlife being traded or eaten, then we can all help each other. And I think that's why we businesses, we have to really closely cooperate. And I would like to go one step further. I would like to suggest just stop all wildlife trade, whether legal or illegal, just stop it, just don't do it. I think we human beings, we can live wonderfully without any wildlife trade. And then the animals will also live wonderfully. So let them be where they are, and we are where we are. If we want to see them, let us travel there, look at documentaries, look at YouTube, or in other ways. But let animals be where they should be. And let us support the communities that are close to their natural habitats, that those communities have a good life, that they don't need to encroach on natural forests and take animals out of these forests. Another thing which we can all do is follow the strategy of Thailand to have 50,000 additional square kilometers of forests. Now, we need many billions of trees to do that, but we can always start with one. As Big Rim, we are planting many trees now, and we look after them. We have a very close cooperation with different organizations, ministries, universities, to ensure that we can plant as many trees as we can do. And we work together with the Thai Chamber of Commerce, and there are over 100,000 members, so that everybody can find a way, how can they grow trees and make it a commercially attractive activity for them, because now everybody is affected by COVID. And so people also would like to see that it's commercially viable, and it's all possible. I think if we as businesses join hands to plant more trees, to help governments to protect wildlife, and if we just be a good ambassador for stopping wildlife trade, I think many things can be achieved. So I hope that we all who listen today enjoy good health and be the beneficiaries of what this excellency just told us, that we will get vaccines for the whole country and continue to enjoy the excellent system of medical volunteers all over the country and the great work of all the medical workers, and better still, have them work on other things than zoonotic pandemics, and that we can all help to stop pandemics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Link, for joining us today. I can say, having worked with Dr. Link, that he really walks the talk. He and his company are, in fact, planting hundreds of thousands of trees to mitigate the impact of climate change. He's been very strongly supporting wild tiger conservation, which, for those of you who know about tigers, means you're protecting the whole forest, the ecosystem under which it operates. He's also been supporting and actively involved in the End Pandemics campaign. And I've also watched him go from rural villages to the podium at a Forbes conference, speaking in fluent Thai, and instead of talking about supply chains and other things that you would think would come from a businessman, he speaks about nature conservation. So we really appreciate his support, and we would love to see other people in his type of position having the same kind of approach and policy. So we're now going to go to a question and answer period. We do have some comments and questions that are coming to us from Facebook. Please continue to provide those if you have. But before we go that, I just want to make a couple comments, and then I'm going to go to my colleague here. First of all, wearing my Freeland cap, I was very happy to hear what the Minister of Environment was talking about in terms of counter wildlife trafficking. We very much believe that this is an important aspect to preventing future pandemics and future zoonotic outbreaks. He spoke specifically about the need for cross-border cooperation. He mentioned the ministers of ASEAN having met in Chiang Mai not too long ago, agreeing on an action plan to counter wildlife trafficking. And that action plan actually already made reference several years ago to the danger of wildlife trafficking posing to zoonotic outbreaks. So it was very forward thinking. We are part of a USAID project called Wildlife Asia, which has been working very much on that because the United States also sees itself as connected to these wildlife supply chains and wants to help suppress them. So very happy to have seen that. And we heard from the Minister of Public Health speaking to the need for cross-agency cooperation. I just want to say one thing, that I think our ministers were, shall I say, very gracious today in saying that the world has adopted One Health. Actually, the reason that we're so excited about this event and having worked with this government and these ministers is that there's been a lot of talk about implementing One Health, but we're actually seeing the Ministry of Public Health, the Prime Minister's Office, and the Ministry of Environment actually coming together with stakeholders like ourselves to create real plans to roll them out. So this is talk converted to action. I would now like to give the floor over to Phimwawati Pahanyotin, the CEO of WWF Thailand, one of our partners for today's event, to sum up her comments, and then we'll go for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, and it's a great honor to be here today at this high-level event. First of all, as representing WWF, we are a global conservation organization with offices in over 100 countries in the world. We are extremely excited by this event. Why? Because we hope that this event is going to set the policy direction for Thailand going forward as a COVID response and by adopting One Health, as we heard from all the top key leaders of the country. Now, why do I think Thailand can be a leader to lead with the global One Health approach? Is number one, as His Excellency Anutin mentioned, Thailand has a very strong health system. The President of the Privy Council, General Surayut, also mentioned that Thailand's health system has been world recognized. And in fact, leading institutions in public health have quoted the Thai health system as achieving good health at low cost. On the health system side, again, looking at the SDGs for health, especially SDG 3.8 on universal health coverage, the good news is Thailand has already achieved this SDG. So therefore, having a very strong public health system to support public health crises. Number two, as WWF, when I go meet colleagues in the rest of the world, they look at me with envy, saying that you have a very strong system of national park management. And thanks to Thailand's strong national parks management, we were able to maintain key biodiversity species, such as the Indo-Chinese tiger. We are actually the only country now in the Mekong region that has a viable, wild Indo-Chinese tiger population. So I think all Thais should be proud of the collaboration among the private sector, such as BIGRIM, NGOs working in this sector, and the Ministry of Environment to really progress on this side of biodiversity conservation. Third, let's not forget the local CSO community in Thailand, a rich network of research institutions and universities that do provide the knowledge of conservation and of public health. And of course, businesses that are a key part in promoting this One Health approach. Now, let me also say why the time is now for policymakers to grasp this crisis into an opportunity for change. So to coincide with the first day of the 74th World Health Assembly on Monday, WWF launched a comprehensive perception survey of the public in 5 countries, and Thailand was one of the countries included in the survey. So actually 85% of the respondents were supportive of policies that would close down high-risk wildlife markets, right? So that's one strong signal that the public is ready to be supportive. Another important report, we commissioned the Economist Intelligence Unit to do a consumer perception survey. And very interestingly, in China, 41% of consumers said they were actively looking to purchase eco-friendly products. So even the cause for businesses is clear. There is a market out there that would come with us on this journey to protect biodiversity and to adopt a One Health approach. So I think the time is now, and we should not have another global pandemic like this again if we could prevent it. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yotin from WWF Thailand. Okay, so we have some questions, and if anybody from the press here, just please put up your hand. But let's go to some that have already been printed out for us. So the first question here is, One Health, what's new here? Since it's been talked about before, what is really new here? So what's new here is we consider this a turning point. Most governments have been in a reactive mode, and we understand why. You see what's happening in India. Not so long ago in the United States, things were quite messy. And in fact, we're still in a crisis situation. But I think having the President of the Privy Council, the Minister of Public Health, also the Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, with the Minister of Environment, with leading conservation organizations here, coming together and saying, let's look forward. Let's take care, let's make sure everybody's wearing masks, let's roll out the vaccine, but let's prevent this from happening again. That's new. Even in the United States, we've heard from the Biden administration, it's been about preparedness for the next pandemic. That's understandable, that's very necessary, but we need to be coming together and create this multi-stakeholder approach to make sure this doesn't happen again. And we're all singing the same tune, that there is root causes in the destruction of nature and the destruction of wildlife. That's new, okay? That's very new. We also have a question from somebody here saying, well, what about, we've got a market right downtown in Bangkok in a place called Chatuchak, an animal section that sells exotic animals. Does that mean that this market is going to stay open or be closed? I don't think either Ms. Pimbowadi or I can answer that question, but we could maybe give our comments on that. I'll go first and say, I certainly hope so. It's Freeland and End Pandemic's viewpoint that all commercial trade in wild animals can pose a risk not only to extinction, but also to human health. So we think Minister Silpa Arch's comments are very strong, excellent, moving us in a positive direction. We hope we can continue moving even beyond that, because both legal and illegal animals can carry a virus. And we've seen that before. The virus doesn't discriminate between illegally trafficked or legally traded animals. The animal section at Chatuchak has a mixture of both. And I think it's in conditions that are ripe for transmitting viruses to each animal, and then to people. So we will certainly continue to campaign to make sure that that happens. I don't know if you have a comment, Ms. Pimbowadi.
Yes, I just wanted to maybe add to what you said, Steve. I think we all agree that we would hope so, that live markets with wildlife, such as Chatuchak, will halt these dangerous activities. In fact, last week, WHO issued new regulations, new guidelines on to stop the sale of live wildlife mammals in open public markets. Wow, that was a mouthful. But yes, so that was a new guideline issued by WHO, and the rationale is really to protect human health, because the very high risk of spillover.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's really significant that we've got WHO and these other international organizations like OIE agreeing on closing such markets that sell wild mammals. That, of course, seems to allow some other animals to be traded, but still, that's big progress. Now the question is, with these expert international organizations making these recommendations, which governments will actually implement them? So again, we're excited about being here in Thailand and hoping to inspire regional action in the same direction, and hopefully global action too. We have some other questions here. And I'm sorry, a couple of these questions were to Minister Anutin and Minister Warawut, who are not here because they have to be in a parliamentary session right now, which is also dealing with COVID-19, so I think we can only comment on this. Given the current global COVID-19 pandemic due to environmental degradation, can you please comment about the disparity of the government's rhetoric on sustainable development and the proposed government budget cut going toward public health and for environmental protection? Did you want to comment on that? Again, we're not government representatives, but we've got some information and some commentary on all these issues.
Well, I could just maybe make a general comment, since I'm not from the Ministry of Environment nor the Ministry of Public Health. But given budget cuts, I think budget cuts are happening due to, of course, the economic situation, probably the shortfall in tax revenue. But it is to say that, more commitment needs to be put in, really, to safeguard human health and animal health and ecosystem health. So it would probably be a message from conservationists such as myself for the government really to prioritize it and really put efforts and show the consistency in their words and their actions.
Thank you. We have another question here about getting more specificity and clarity on bans, banning wildlife trafficking, banning illegal hunting versus legal hunting, I think we can comment on this. So from Freeland's point of view and End Pandemic's point of view, a ban on the commercial trade in wild animals would not ban indigenous subsistence hunting or, for that matter, annual sport hunting that's sustainable. So it's not going to stop people from hunting deer or ducks during those seasons, or from indigenous peoples harvesting non-forest timber products and wild animals, provided that it's legal within that country. We're talking about banning commercial trade in wild animals, which has, we haven't even mentioned, topping $20 billion a year. And our concern is that the legal trade masks an illegal trade and can mask viruses. So that's just to give some more clarity from our standpoint, but perhaps you want to speak to high-risk species or other things.
Yes, so I wanted to emphasize what Steve had mentioned in terms of commercial illegal wildlife trade. So we're talking about scale here and not focusing on specific cases of indigenous communities who rely on certain practices for their livelihood. So we are really talking about the scale. And the scale is what is driving biodiversity loss. So it's an encroachment onto our natural systems, and therefore encroaching on the interface that keeps us safe from zoonotic diseases. But moreover, illegal wildlife trade at a commercial scale also means that there is criminality, there is criminal activity behind it. So one could also look at the negative impacts from that angle and the reasons why priority should be given to clamp down on large-scale commercial, transnational illegal wildlife trade. And Thailand is sadly a hub of those kinds of criminal activities. Not necessarily that the crime is done here, so it's not necessarily that the critically endangered animal species are killed here, but they could be transported through Thailand, as Thailand is a global transport hub as well. So please also bear that in mind in terms of the interconnectedness of financial flows as well as transportation routes.
Thank you. We have a question here for Dr. Link. Is Dr. Link still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Hi.
Okay, great. Dr. Link, we have a question here for you. If you could speak more to why you personally and why your company is getting so heavily involved in this issue of nature protection and ending pandemics. You spoke to it, but whoever's written this question wants to hear more about that, how you can justify your time working on this.
Well, maybe contrary to common belief, companies are not there to maximize profits, but actually to bring benefits to society. So usually if you look at companies, most companies are small and they are owned by somebody who thinks that they have some capabilities, have some service, some products which would be desired by people in their environment. So actually all businesses, or let's say nearly every businessman wants to do something good. So we cannot separate business from environment. We have to live in harmony with nature. And of course, what we do as humans has an adverse impact on environment. It's difficult to help. When we exhale, there's carbon dioxide coming out of our mouth. We use all kinds of products. We want to live a comfortable life. So when we can, I think let us try to do something that contributes to the improvement of the environment. So maybe in the background you see the largest Southeast Asian solar plant which we built in Vietnam, so that we try to contribute to going towards carbon neutrality in 2050. And we hope, of course, to do it earlier than that. And then we would like to share some of our resources to help issues and places nobody else is willing or interested to do it. So So the tiger conservation is something that really needs help. And since maybe people are not so keen on tigers, and since people are more keen on elephants, which is also something wonderful, we thought that let us help the apex of the predators in cooperation with the WWF. And when I was in the Thai Chamber of Commerce board, I was asked to look after environment and energy, which of course very close to my heart. And then we set up the Circular Economy Committee, which I was asked to chair. So this is somewhere where we can contribute to society more than our services and products, and which we know is of benefit to everybody. And then of course the next thing comes, BGRIM has been since many decades, probably since the beginning of the company 143 years ago, involved in education. So we try to also help those communities that are close to these natural habitats of animals to have better education, to have better understanding, have better livelihood. I think this all comes together that we all want to live a good life and we all contribute. And there's only one health that we see now. This pandemic goes all over the world and actually has been going all over the world since people went with ships to the United States or other places. So you cannot stop pandemics and diseases. So we're trying to find out what is it where BGRIM can help and where other people are not taking such a great interest in. So it's not only in trying to stop pandemics, but also in other issues of education or culture. But of course, pandemics has this unbelievable, devastating impact now this time on the whole world. So we think that, what can we do about that? And so we think that if we can protect wildlife, and we can do more than we did before for that, then we help everybody in the whole world. And then we can go to bed happily and see that, okay, we've done what we can do. And that's why I say we would wish that many of our colleagues would do the same. And I can say that many of our colleagues actually do. They help society in great ways, mainly maybe helping poor people, and not yet so much in helping natural forests. But I think maybe this seminar also brings about an additional way of thinking that more people will be interested to help a natural habitat of wild animals that will bring more safety to us and good things to wildlife. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Link. If I may, there's another question for you, which is, are you satisfied with what you've heard from the Thai government this morning?
Actually, I'm so highly appreciative that even the Prime Minister wrote that he supports this wildlife protection, and that we have such a forceful minister who told me also personally that he will do everything in his power to do what he said he will do. So, and his sister, well-known conservationist. So I fully believe that this family really wants to protect environment and protect wildlife. Now maybe sometimes the minister always has to see that he looks after the whole of the country. And so in the BGRIM case, maybe we can go a step further. I think wildlife trade should be stopped. I don't see why we need now to trade in wildlife. Let them be where they are. And so, but in his capacity as the minister and then the Minister of Public Health, who also know, who has been working so hard day and night now during the last 2 years to ensure better health for everybody in Thailand. I think I'm so appreciative that they work so hard and try their best to do what they can do. And so I think it's up to us as citizens to support them and also help whatever we can do to make Thailand a better and disease-free country.
Thank you. We've got some other questions here, some tough ones. I'll read the first one. Zoonotic or not, if indeed the COVID-19 originated from a lab or leaked from a lab, it would not actually be considered quote-unquote zoonotic. What would be the future approach of governments on labs experimenting with viruses? If I may say something first, and then Natalie, I'll go over to you. First of all, the WHO has been looking at all the different theories. As we know, they went to Wuhan, they did an investigation. Some people have questioned whether it was robust enough, etc. But no matter which theory you look at, it points to the same solution. They're looking at as the most probable theory that the virus would have come from a farm that was breeding wild and exotic animals that was feeding wildlife markets. Maybe in a wet market, maybe someplace else. The other two theories would be that the animals were just sold directly, perhaps through a supply chain coming from another country directly into a wild animal market, part of a wet market. And the third theory that some people still hang on to is that it was coming from a lab that experiments on wild animals, including bats. And all of those theories and all those situations, we're talking about the virus originating from a wild animal. Those bats would not have flown to the lab by themselves. I mean, they're collected or traded. We could go into that in a whole separate session, but it is zoonotic. And so we know the drivers of zoonotic outbreaks. They are destruction of nature and rising commercial trade in wild animals. Those are the main drivers and have been before with those other pandemics and zoonotic outbreaks that were mentioned before, HIV, Ebola, SARS, MERS, etc. So if we know that those are the main drivers, that's what we need to focus on. In terms of better security around labs, that is not something that I'm an expert on. I'm not sure you even want to speak to that, but if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with you that zoonotic means it comes from animal origin, but how it got to the lab, I mean, it's still zoonotic, right? It's probably from a mammal origin. In terms of how governments, if it were to be proven that it did come from a lab, that is a biosafety, biosecurity question, which both Steve and I are not experts on biosafety and biosecurity. And WHO has guidelines on that. International health regulations and biosafety, there are regulations on that. So I think the person who asked this question might want to follow up on that trail. But nevertheless, whatever the finding is, I think it does not minimize the importance of preserving nature, preserving biodiversity, and making sure we respect that safe interface between nature and humans. Because no matter what, we have to prevent the next pandemic from happening. And if it's going to come from zoonotic sources, it doesn't dilute the importance of what we are talking about today.
We have a question from the audience. There's a microphone right there. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to follow up from Dr. Link's comments on illegal wildlife trade. We know that right now, because of COVID lockdown, counter wildlife trafficking and illegal wildlife trade have been reduced during the past year or so, because the countries closed down their borders. The borders been sealed off. And what do you think about in the futures if we go back to normal in the next year? Do you think illegal wildlife trade will be increasing or decreasing? And what do you need if we see some kind of increasing of wildlife trafficking? Do you need government to take more action? So what do we need the government to act in order to reduce illegal wildlife trade in the futures? Thank you.
Would you like to summarize and respond to that?
Sure, I can quickly
make sure they
respond.
heard it.
I can quickly respond to that. I think if your question was, given the current situation, how do you think government response should should be in order to clamp down or discourage future demand for illegal wildlife trade. Correct. So from what I heard in the question, I mean, as long as the demand exists, right? And if you look at statistics from reports that WWF have done through the public perception, there is a group of hardcore buyers. So perhaps looking at that group of hardcore buyers, understanding where the demand comes from, could be a first step in terms of designing the right policies to clamp down and to reduce the demand. And studies have shown that when governments enact policy, it does have a dissuasive effect on demand. For example, when China last year imposed in February a ban on the sale of wildlife in its markets. So they saw a substantial decrease in demand. So that's one way of, I think, actually how government can concretely contribute to preventing the next pandemic by reducing the sale of wildlife. But also, I think the pandemic has raised the issue of online and digital activity. I think most of us now are shopping online, doing things online. So where is that, I guess, cyber surveillance, cyber security in terms of understanding how that illegal commercial wildlife trade has now shifted online? So maybe involving other unconventional partners in the internet space, in the IT space, to really help us tackle and understand the new flows of demand.
Thank you. I would just add to that what we've seen is a disruption of wildlife trafficking from COVID-19 for a couple reasons. One of the major markets in the world, China, has actually made it very difficult to sell now because they've come down hard on consumption and trade. We hope that those regulations stick. Secondly, supply chains. It's just hard to move things around. Just like none of us can really travel very easily across borders, it's also hard to move cargo. However, the marine shipping industry does continue to move, and that does carry the bulk of concealed wildlife body parts moving around the world from Africa, South America, Asia to their markets. What we've noticed is panic in the supply chains. Some people are holding on to huge amounts of elephant tusks, scales of pangolins, the most heavily trafficked mammal in the world, lion and other big cat skeletons. These are the kinds of things that you can hang onto and store. Rhino horns too, because they don't degrade very easily. So, but they're moving them, we think, we don't know, but we think because there's panic that the prices may go down, and they want to offload them at the best price they can. Because if China's ban on trade sticks, that's going to hurt sales a lot. So when the COVID-19 restrictions come up, it'll be very interesting, but I think what the Minister of Environment spoke to before is the thing we need to do now. ASEAN needs to implement its action plan. They have an action plan to counter wildlife trade, to counter wildlife trafficking. We've got a couple other interesting questions here. First, the costs of all of this to people. Are we not being tough on those who are trading wildlife? They must have heard me mention the legal and illegal trade. Are we not being unfair to those who rely on hunting, gathering, and trade? So let me just respond to that, and Natalie, happy for you to join in. First of all, to repeat, we're not talking about banning indigenous or subsistence hunting. But I would say that, in terms of the commercial trade in wild animals, a lot of the trade, a lot of the people involved, it's a criminal trade. There is a legal trade. There are people involved that are doing it legally. But I think the legal trade sometimes confuses enforcement and mass and illegal trade. Also, specifically, our call for a ban on commercial trade in wild animals comes with the recommendation that governments compensate legal dealers in a one-off compensation so that they can transition into a new line of work. So that would not be unfair. In terms of the costs, studies have been done that the cost to actually repair Mother Earth, to do all the things that we heard the Minister of Environment talk about before on a global scale would cost $260 billion over 10 years. That sounds like a lot of money. That's 26 billion, right, over each year over 10 years. The cost, the invoice that COVID-19 is delivering to the global community right now is at $11.5 trillion. So 260 billion over 10 years, 26 billion a year, we're talking about less than 1% to prevent. So the cost of action is much, much less than inaction. Prevention is much cheaper, just like in health insurance.
I think you mentioned all the salient points. Yes, prevention is more cost effective than paying for another pandemic like this, especially if you look at the fact that pandemic is impacting the most vulnerable components of our society. So you have to think about that as well in terms of the human impacts as well, real human impacts, not to mention the 3.5 million deaths that have occurred all over the world. So an ounce of prevention probably weighs much more than doing business as usual.
That's a good additional point there, that we really owe it to the people of the world to take away the threats that could lead to another pandemic, and firmly believe that wildlife trade and wildlife trafficking is one of those threats. Another question we've got is, what's next? So what's going to come out of all these strong words from today? So we are talking with the Thai government agencies and with each other about forming essentially a task force that would include the different agencies, NGOs, practitioners from public health, environment, animals, and wild animals. We need to come together to put this into action. That's at the level of Thailand. On top of that, I'm aware that Thailand is a member of ASEAN, and on July 7th, there will be a special briefing to the members of parliament of the 10 ASEAN member countries, hosted by the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, to also look at where did pandemics come from, what can we do to make sure they don't happen again. We will be there. We're very happy also that the United States government has shown interest in this. USAID is helping us out with this. And I think it's worth pointing out the United States, where I'm from, is second biggest importer of wildlife in the world. And so we're seeing stronger measures happen there too with China. So I'm actually hopeful that the two superpowers are really starting to take this a little more seriously, but also very happy that here in Southeast Asia we've got a champion country in Thailand so far. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess in terms of including current events, so as we all know, this week is the 74th World Health Assembly, and I think this event is very timely that we are talking about One Health during World Health Assembly, because we, as in our partners, would love to see more of a One Health approach being discussed, being debated at the highest levels at the World Health Assembly. And some of you may know there's discussions on countries ratifying or adopting a international pandemics treaty right now happening. And you know, the government of Thailand is one of the signatories to the commentary for this international pandemics treaty. So it seems like there is real momentum, not just only in Thailand, but globally, to really address the issue of preventing the next pandemics from this collective experience that we are unfortunately facing.
So we've got too many more questions. I don't think we can handle these during this particular segment. And also, at least one of them is directed at some of the high-level officials who I just really think need to be answering this themselves. So I apologize to that to some of the questioners. But we're committed to not only helping to implement this new policy, but to holding a second event where hopefully we can have more people join in the room, have it be more interactive. And so if there's any other comments or questions from the audience right here or through Facebook, please let us know now. And Dr. Link, I recognize you're still online. If anybody has anything more that they want to say before we close out, let me know. Okay. All right. So I want to thank Be Grim. I want to thank the End Pandemics Campaign Alliance. I want to thank WWF, and we at Freeland are also very thankful to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand for hosting us today. And special thanks go to His Excellency General Surayut Chulanon, Ministers Anutin Charnvirakul, and Ministers Silpa Archa for joining us today. And thank you, Dr. Link, for showing such leadership from the private sector, reminding us that this is not just a government issue. We've got to work across NGO, corporate, private sector, government lines. And we look forward to working with all of you and happy to take other questions after. So thank you very much.